Hey friends, before we dive in, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. It means the world to me. Now let's begin. The loudest sound at the reading of the will wasn't the attorney clearing his throat. It was my mom and dad chuckling like they'd won the lottery while they slid a fat check across the table to my sister, Emily. Then a single brand new dollar bill glided my way, practically laughing at me. Dad didn't even flinch when he said, "Go make your own money, son." Mom gave that little satisfied smirk and added, "Some kids just never quite make the cut." Nobody argued. Not even Emily. I sat there quiet, hands flat on the table, while the lawyer fidgeted with one sealed envelope that was clearly marked just for me. Grandpa had left it, and that tiny pause was enough to wipe the grin off Mom's face. I used to think silence only happened when people left the room. Growing up, I learned it can sit right next to you at a full dinner table while everyone passes the dishes over your plate like you're not even there. By the time I was 8, I understood how being invisible really works. It's not that people don't see you. It's that they choose not to. I still remember one chilly fall afternoon. That same gray light that would later pour across the will reading table. Mom was lining up trophies on the mantel, buffing each one with her sleeve until it sparkled. Every single one belonged to Emily. Debate medals, piano plaques, a fancy glass award with her name carved in fancy script. My little blue ribbon from the county science fair sat crumpled on an end table, folded in half. No frame, no shine. By dinner, it had vanished completely. Dad was always saying stuff like, "Focus on real accomplishments," while clapping Emily on the back and telling her which elite internships and colleges would snap her up. He talked to me like I was the family's spare utility player. Take out the trash, walk the dog, run forgotten lunches to school. "You're dependable, Noah," he told me once, like reliability was the booby prize. The only person who never spoke to me like that was Grandpa Henry. His voice was slow and easy, like he had all the time in the world for me to answer or not answer. He'd bring me to his lake cabin on weekends. The smell of aged pine and the gentle slap of water against the dock soaked right into me. He kept 2 fishing poles, one shiny store-bought one with his initials carved deep into the handle, and he always handed me the carved one. "People stare at the surface," he'd say. "They miss the current running underneath." Those afternoons were the only times I ever felt truly seen. We'd sit with our lines in the water, watching the wind mess up the reflections, and he never once asked why I was so quiet. He already knew. One Christmas break, when Emily brought home another huge award, my parents threw a big celebration dinner. The house was packed with laughter and perfume. I spent the night carrying guest coats to the spare room. Walking past the dining room, I heard Mom laugh, that same soft laugh I'd hear again years later at the will reading. "Noah's fine," she told someone. "He doesn't really need much." That sentence stuck harder than any yelling match ever could. I realized right then, in our family, needing nothing meant you deserved nothing. It wasn't even meanness. They just believed their own version of who mattered. I drove to the lake cabin first thing the next morning. Grandpa was already out on the dock sorting tackle. He didn't ask why I was early. He just handed me the carved pole and waited till I sat down. The lake was glass still, the air biting, the world honest in a way our house never was. That was the day I accepted my place in the Carter family, and the day I started wondering if I had to keep it. The morning after the will reading, the lake cabin felt alien. Too much sunlight, too much noise. My parents moved through the rooms like they were already measuring for new furniture, flipping through drawers, pricing picture frames, talking dollars and cents while pretending to grieve. I stood by the window watching frost drip off the railing, trying to mute the echo of their laughter from the day before. Emily drifted in holding a coffee mug she never drank from, hovering like she wanted to comfort me, but didn't know any words that wouldn't make her look bad. "It's a shock for all of us," she whispered, staring at her own reflection. Us. Even her sympathy had to star her. Dad walked in next with a stack of Grandpa's files, dropping them on the table like he'd already inherited the place. "We'll handle everything," he said, meaning they would. His eyes slid over me the way you glance past a piece of furniture. "Emily will take care of the important responsibilities." Mom followed, sorting mail, humming. When she got to my tiny pile, $1, one sealed letter, one old key. She paused just long enough for the air to get heavy. Then, without looking up, she repeated Dad's line like scripture, "Go earn your own." No anger, no hesitation, just verdict. Emily shifted awkwardly. Dad pretended to read something fascinating. The only sound was the dock creaking in the cold outside. I didn't answer. I just closed my fingers around that envelope. Suddenly it weighed more than everything they'd grabbed for themselves. For the first time I realized they weren't ignoring me. They were erasing me, and they thought I'd let them. I left before anyone noticed. No slammed doors, no dramatic goodbye, just the quiet click of the latch. The winter air was sharp enough to keep my head clear. I set the envelope on the passenger seat and drove. Every mile loosened their voices in my head. I checked into a little inn up on the ridge, the same one Grandpa and I used to stop at for hot cocoa. The owner, Rosa, recognized me but didn't pry. She just handed me a key to the quiet corner room. For walls that didn't expect anything from me, best gift I'd had in years. Inside, I opened the envelope. A key, a short note in Grandpa's handwriting, a string of numbers, and one line. Begin where the truth was first bent. No further directions. Just enough to pull me into the shadows he'd always hinted at. I read it 4 times, tracing every curl of his pen. Then I grabbed my notebook and started working the numbers, dates, account entries, valuations. Eventually the columns lined up, but only if you already suspected someone had hidden payments and fudged others. And I did. I opened my laptop and did what I'm actually good at: quiet, careful, relentless. Old company filings, public records, payment trails that never quite matched the official story. When something was off, I highlighted it yellow. When it repeated, I boxed it red. Hours disappeared. No rage, no crying, just cold clarity. The truth wasn't hiding. It was sitting in plain sight waiting for someone who wasn't blinded by the family fairy tale. By sunset, the notebook was thick with patterns, motives, and one shell company my father used to advise years ago. I drew a clean line down a fresh page and started building a timeline. Dates, amounts, signatures, discrepancies, everything backed by public record or the papers Grandpa had squirreled away. No opinions, no accusations, just facts lined up so neatly they screamed on their own. When night fell, I looked at the second item from the envelope, the key. I knew exactly which lock it fit. The cabinet under his desk he always touched before leaving the room, a tiny habit I'd stored away as a kid without knowing why. I drove back after dark. Their cars were still there, lined up like they owned the place already. I walked in quiet, the damp board swallowed my footsteps. The house was dim, laughter leaking from the living room, thin and nervous now. They were talking future investments. Still hungry, I slipped into the study unnoticed. The air still smelled like old books and cedar. I knelt, slid the key in, and the cabinet opened with a soft, final click. Inside, binders labeled by year, handwritten notes, a tiny recorder, printed emails, and another envelope with my name on it. I didn't open that one yet. I flipped through the binders first. Page after page of proof. Mom and Dad's fingerprints all over decisions that slowly stripped Grandpa of control he never complained about publicly. Rounded payments, memos in Dad's exact legal phrasing. Advice that always somehow benefited them. I scanned everything, saved it to the cloud, backed it up twice. Clean. Professional. In the corner of the room, I noticed a tiny camera blended into the bookshelf. Easy to miss unless you'd spent years learning to see what others ignore. Grandpa's note had said the truth only works when the right people finally see it. The house had been watching them the whole time. I locked the cabinet, pocketed the key, and walked back into the hallway. Mom's voice floated out, sharp and sure. Noah will stay out of it. He never had the head for complicated things. I paused in the shadows, smiling for the first time in days. The walls were finally listening. I came back at dawn. My parents were already dressed like they had a board meeting, faces tight with fake calm. Emily twisted her sleeve, pale. When the knock came, they all straightened like they were about to accept applause. It was just Mr. Ellis, Grandpa's oldest friend and executor. He stepped inside carrying a folder and a small projector, nodded at me first, than the rest of them. No small talk. Mom forced a smile. Is this really necessary? He didn't answer. He just set the folder down. Press play. Grandpa's voice filled the room, calm and unmistakable, recorded right in that study. If you're hearing this, the conditions have been met. I trusted those closest to me to act with honor. Some didn't. So I left instructions to make sure the truth speaks for itself. Next came silent footage. Mom and Dad yesterday, rifling drawers, tossing photos, pricing furniture, talking about leverage and what we're entitled to. Mom stepped forward. This is taken out of. Mr. Ellis raised one finger. Quiet. Then the screen filled with records, payments, notes. The exact anomalies I'd circled in red. Dad's initials. Mom's signatures on memos she'd always called routine. Dad tried. Old paperwork, easily misunderstood. Grandpa's voice returned, softer now. Noah, if you're listening, you've already found what they hoped would stay buried. The will reading wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Everything else depends on what you do with the truth they tried to kill. Mom's mask cracked. Noah, stop this. You don't understand how these things. I still didn't speak. Mr. Ellis opened the folder and slid out the real documents, signed and notarized long before Grandpa passed. Your parents keep the properties named in the will. Emily keeps her trust. But the remainder of the estate, including full control of the research foundation Grandpa built, goes to Noah alone. Dad jumped up. This is absurd. We'll contest. You can, Mr. Ellis said calmly. But if you do, every asset reverts 100% to the foundation. That was Henry's condition. There's also a clause triggering review of certain past advisory work. You know exactly which work. The room went dead silent. Mom's breath caught. Emily stared at the floor. I stepped forward and set the cabinet key on the table. It made the tiniest clink. Mom flinched like I'd fired a gun. Mr. Ellis looked at me. All that's left is your acknowledgement. I nodded once. No gloating, no speech. Just the clean sound of the puzzle clicking together. My parents didn't argue anymore, not because they agreed, but because they finally understood the game was over. After they left, I stayed behind. The lake house settled back into its old quiet, smelling faintly of cedar and paper. Grandpa's presence untouched by everything that had just blown through. I stood at his desk, fingers on the worn edge where he used to tap when he was thinking. Now it felt like a line I'd finally crossed. Outside, mist hovered over the water, rising and falling like slow breathing. I walked to the end of the dock, boards cool under my bare feet. Same spot where I sat as a kid just trying to figure the world out. Grandpa used to say, still water tells the truth if you're willing to listen. For the first time in forever, I listened. No condescending voices, no dismissive laughs, no pitying looks. Just the gentle slap of the lake and my own heartbeat. I didn't replay their faces or wonder if they felt bad. That wasn't my load anymore. The sun broke through the clouds and painted a golden path straight to me. The quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like mine. I sat on the edge, feet dangling above the water, cold air brushing my skin like the lake itself was saying welcome home. It wasn't the documents or the recordings that changed everything. It was the silence afterward, the kind that only comes when the truth finally gets the last word. Some endings tiptoe in. Some freedoms do too. I stood up, took one last look at the still water, and walked away knowing the quiet now belonged to me. If this story hit you in the chest, hang out for a second. Breathe. There are more quiet truths coming for anyone willing to listen.